New Buy Sell Keep Avoid is back for Game Week 24. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan, and with double Game Week here and now, it's time to explore those Liverpool, Everton players and many more of those transfer moves you want to be making this week. But before we do, if you haven't checked out this week's Stick to FPL podcast episode, I really recommend it, particularly if you are wondering when to play the assistant manager chip. We do a full breakdown of everything you need to know about the new chip that is now available for us FPL managers. So go check it out using the link in the description or search Stick to FPL on your favorite podcast platform. But today's video is going to be divided into two sections. The first of which we will be looking at players you may already have in your team and which you should keep and which ones you should sell. We'll then be looking at transfers in, which players should you buy and which ones you should avoid. Players will be tier listed with the best players at the top and the worst ones at the bottom. And as always guys, we are going to start with the forward section today, and I do have to admit on the forwards that it is going to be debatable, a lot of these players, and I think particularly if you are looking to buy Cody Gakpo, you may actually end up having to sell someone higher on this list. But I've tried to put out the players in order of priority based on their performances, their stats, and their fixtures as well. And at the top, I am going to put Wissa. If there's one player who I would not sell for Cody Gakpo, it would be this guy. He is one of my favorite forwards to own in FPL right now, outside of Isak and Gakpo, who are the clear top two right now. 3.81 expected goals in the past 6 game weeks is very, very high. And even though he's only scored twice, these great fixtures ahead and all of the opportunities he is getting could lead to some more fabulous goals from him. So looking forward to him. I definitely think you should not only be keeping him, but maybe even be buying him as well. But that section is a little bit later. Mateta is another player I would keep. Only one blank is not enough to put me off quite yet. And Manchester United have not been filling us with confidence as FPL managers. Chris Wood I would also try and keep if possible for this Brighton fixture and maybe that Fulham fixture as well. The next couple of weeks are quite good for him. And in Game Week 29, we actually see Chris Wood face Ipswich Town. So I think that's going to be a good opportunity in Game Week 29 when a lot of other players are blanking. Wood actually could be one of the better players to own in blank Game Week 29. For monitors, I've got Watkins in here. I don't think he is a definite sell, but reduced minutes in his last game week it does worry me just a little bit with him getting substituted off. Obviously, no goal in Game Week 23 for him as well. So I wonder if that 65-minute substitution is a sign that maybe Duran could come back into the starting 11 for Aston Villa. We've got Nicholas Jackson as a monitor here as well. He was previously a little lower, but now the fixture next is against West Ham, which is quite nice actually. And even though Chelsea didn't look so great against Man City, I thought Jackson was the best player on the pitch on the Chelsea side of things anyway. So maybe a beginning of a return to form for him, but it's way too early to say. So he's not going to be a keep, but maybe a player to monitor if you do still have him. But as I say, a lot of these players, particularly in the monitor category, even though they're not necessarily direct sells, if you see an opportunity of another forward you would prefer, then you might just sell one of these monitors. That's absolutely fine. Cunha's in here. Stats are down. Fixtures not getting any better. Aston Villa at home is okay, but Liverpool and Bournemouth away after that, not particularly good. And João Pedro doesn't have the best fixtures here either. There are some okay ones in here. Chelsea at home, Southampton away, not bad, but his numbers aren't great outside of the penalties. But Haaland I would sell. Last week we did say I would keep Haaland for one more week if you do own him for that Chelsea fixture, but Arsenal away versus Chelsea at home, these are opposite ends of the spectrum when we're talking about some of the bigger teams in the Premier League. Chelsea actually one of the weaker defences in the Premier League right now, and Arsenal still right on top with those defensive numbers. So definitely might be the time to sell Haaland, particularly if you want to spread your funds and maybe buy some Liverpool players for the double game week. Raul Jimenez is also going to be a sell, really disappointing recently, and the fixtures are bad for him. And Solanke, with his long-term injury, we're expecting him out for a month. Just get rid of him, just sell him. He's got no place in our FPL teams for the time being. For midfielders, people are still selling Cole Palmer after a blank against Man City, but as we just mentioned, the fixtures do start to look a little bit better for Chelsea, particularly in Game Week 27 and Game Week 28, where Chelsea face Southampton and Leicester back-to-back. You're going to want to have Palmer for those games, so if you do have him currently in your team, I would not be looking to sell him, certainly not. Keep him, wait for these great opportunities for him to get back to his best, scoring goals, getting assists. We know he has has done it so many times before. Unfortunately, Palmer does often disappoint in some of the more difficult games, but when the games are easier, Palmer is a superstar. Don't let the game against Man City fool you. Brian Mbeumo, another one of my favourite players in FPL right now, so I would not be looking to sell him if you do have him in your team. We will be talking about him in the buy section, and he is definitely one of those players who I personally am looking at buying. And Gordon, I think you can keep for one more game week against Fulham at home. It's not too bad of a fixture, and he has been in great form, generally getting FPL returns 9 out of 10 game weeks, which is really, really impressive. We've got 3 goals and 2 assists in the past 6, so we're almost at an attacking return per game. Decent underlying numbers here as well, but it has to be said, after game week 24, before game week 25, we will learn if Newcastle do indeed blank in game week 29, and if so, it might be time to move Gordon on. But let's give it one more game week, let's assess the situation. Information is power, and certainly Gordon is not a player who's been disappointing really at all. Luis Diaz is one to monitor, and I think this really is down to the individual. Do you have faith that Luis Diaz will continue to play, will continue to start during this double game week? And if so, can he produce the goods? We know his ceiling is very high. When he is in form, when he is doing the business, things go very, very well. So I know everyone's talking about Salah and Gakpo and Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I can definitely see Luis Diaz competing with the points. Potentially, but it is a risk, and he is much higher risk, maybe not higher reward than Salah, but higher risk, higher reward potentially than someone like Gakpo, but maybe not trustworthy for everyone, which is why I understand why some people might want to swap him for someone else. But he's going to go in the monitor section regardless. Good fixtures for him. Rodgers is one to monitor as well. Definitely not a priority sell with Wolves and Ipswich and even Chelsea in the next 3 fixtures, though Rodgers has been disappointing. Well, certainly in the last game week, another 1-pointer for him. He just keeps picking up those yellow cards. Super frustrating. Ahmad, another one to monitor. The fixtures aren't too bad for Manchester United generally, but if Man United continue to disappoint, he is going to quickly find himself on the chopping block. And if I'm totally honest, guys, from around this point onwards, I would be okay with selling any of these midfielders. Enzo is here as well. I would be fine selling him. The only issue is that he's so cheap, unless you've got money in the bank or making multiple transfer moves, you're probably not going to benefit too much from selling someone like Enzo because, you know, he's only 4.8 million. The fixture against West Ham isn't even that bad. So maybe you can afford to hold him for one more week, but also maybe you do want to sell him as well. I think either one is fine. That's why he's in monitor. As for ourselves, I would put Iwobi in here. Disappointing performances, difficult fixtures, poor underlying numbers generally, other than his key passes and expected assists. But really, we want goals from him. And even though he has scored 2 goals in the last 6 game weeks, we know the nature of those goals by this point, and maybe a little bit fortunate. Ismail Assar is also going to go in the sell category. His numbers seem to drop off a little bit more every single game week, so no longer in that hot vein of form. And let's be honest, Crystal Palace fixtures, they are kind of mid going forward. And Savinho is the final sell here. He's been benched for the last 2 game weeks for Manchester City. I don't know why. With Marmoush coming into the team, it's going to make it even more difficult for Savinho to get game time. Plus, the fixtures are really poor. Time to remove Savinho if you did pick him up as a differential. For our defenders to keep, I've got Virgil van Dijk in here. If you do have him in your team already, I don't think he's worth a transfer out. And, you know, this is a player with some attacking threat, some attacking potential here. We see 0.6 XG in the past 6 game weeks and 0.32 XA. So that's kind of an expectation of an attacking return every 3 games. And he's got 2 games in the next 1 game week. So there's definitely a good chance that Virgil does get on the score sheets during this double game week. And clean sheets are always a possibility for that Everton fixture in particular. Gabriel is another player I would look to keep, even though I don't like the Man City at home game generally. Arsenal do like to keep things tight, park the bus against some of the bigger teams. And then after that, Leicester, West Ham, and even Forest, I think are good opportunities for Arsenal defenders to keep clean sheets. So it's not all bad, really, for Gabriel. And he picked up some points last game week. Clean sheets seem to be back on the menu for him. And Aina, yes, usually we see Aina in the buy avoid category, but this week people are actually selling their Nottingham Forest defenders. And I have to say, I don't agree. And people will have called me consistently an Aina hater, but I think for this game week, certainly, I see no strong reason to sell him from FPL teams. Unless you are desperate to try and get Trent Alexander-Arnold in your team, and this is the only way to do it, that's really the only way I would sell Aina, because I think Forest, despite a difficult performance against Bournemouth last week, they actually didn't concede that many high quality chances. I think Brighton at home is a really good fixture right now. They are struggling for goals. So Aina, I think, is a very good keep for this week. Maybe we can have a different conversation from game 25 onwards, where the fixtures do start to get a little tougher. But I've got no problem with him this week. I think you should keep him if you do have him. And I would say the same about Milenkovic, Murillo, maybe even Nico Williams if you have them in your FPL team. Forest defenders, I think, are absolutely fine this week. And if you do have them, I'd actually be looking to play them as well, even above the likes of Lewis Hall and Robinson, who I've put slightly lower down in the monitor category. These are two players with pretty difficult fixtures in the next couple of weeks. Hall, it gets difficult for even longer, and I don't know, I just think that these players, ideally you keep them, but I don't think they are maybe as untouchable as they were a couple of weeks ago. I think we can now start to consider maybe removing them only if the right opportunity comes along. And that's why they're in the monitor section. They're not sells, certainly not sells, but they're dropping down the list. They're dropping down the pecking order a little bit. And that's mostly due to fixtures, which are so important for your defenders. Saliba is a player I'd be more willing to let go if you are on double Arsenal defence, for example, particularly if you're looking to pick up a Liverpool defender right now. 6.2 million Saliba is rarely value for money, so I'd be okay to lose him, but he's not an absolute sell. But Mazraoui, I know Man United finally picked up a clean sheet, but still don't fully trust this team, and I think there's just better cheap defenders to have in your FPL team right now. Pedro Porro is in here as well, as Spurs continue to be one of the worst defences in the Premier League, and given some of the recent performances, maybe even one of the worst teams generally in the Premier League, which is not something I thought I'd be saying a few months ago, but here we are. And Rico Lewis has just found himself out of the Manchester City team, and with the poor fixtures as well, there's really no motivation to keep Rico Lewis anymore for your FPL teams. A definite sell there. And at this halfway point in the video, I would love if you dropped a like on the video. It really does help so much, and do subscribe if you want to follow along with the transfer tips every week. Of course, you guys have been loving the Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid series, and hopefully we can keep up the good results each and every game week. And speaking of good results, no change on the top of the buy list in forwards, because Cody Gakpo is once again the #1 buy for this game week. Congratulations to everyone who did pick him up last week, and if you did, well, I think you can hope for more points against Bournemouth and Everton in this next fixture, and even game week 25 is nice for him as well. So it's definitely not too late to pick up Cody Gakpo if you have a free Liverpool slot. And I think that is maybe the one stipulation. I don't think I'd be taking -4s to remove one Liverpool player to replace them with Gakpo, but I think it is pretty evident that Gakpo is one of the most important Liverpool players to own in game week 24. So yeah, if you can get to him easily, I would just do it, to be fair. Wissa is also going to be on this list. He's probably my second favourite forward to buy this week. I know it's only a single game week, and we probably do want to focus more on double game week players if we aren't tripled up on Liverpool already. But Spurs, West Ham, Leicester in the next 3, really nice fixtures, great underlying numbers. I think Wissa at that price tag is actually going to be a buy, particularly if you're looking for someone a little bit cheaper. But if you want to go someone even cheaper, take a little bit of a risk, then you could go for the double game week Everton attacker Ndiaye. Iliman Ndiaye is a left winger primarily, but he is a penalty taker now that Calvert-Lewin is potentially injured for this double game week. So that's going to be very, very beneficial to see Ndiaye with a great fixture at home against Leicester, on penalties as well. He has been one of the key scorers for Everton over the recent game weeks, but as we have mentioned before, Everton don't really score that many goals. So even if Ndiaye scores half of Everton's goals, if Everton only score 1 goal every 3 game weeks, that's not very useful. But still, with the penalties now, I think that has definitely increased his appeal, but this one is risky. So not for the faint-hearted. go for and die at your own risk. Now, the rest of the forwards, honestly, don't fill me with too much joy, but we'll go over them anyway. Chris Wood, I still think, is a monitor if you don't have him already. I think he has proven that he can score against anyone, and he doesn't need great underlying numbers to get on the score sheet. Very rarely blanks, has been in great form. The Bournemouth game seems to be more of an anomaly for Chris Wood. Penalty taker as well. There's plenty to love about him still, but maybe getting a little bit too expensive to justify this particular run of fixtures, which is why he is no longer a buy in FPL. Watkins is also on this list. I'm a little cautious about his minutes, but the fixtures are really nice for him. Delap, ordinarily, I would probably put in the avoid category, but if you are someone who likes to target Southampton, I call it Operation Target Southampton, it works, guys. It works. Targeting the Southampton team works in FPL, and Delap as their main central striker on penalties as well. There's always going to be opportunities for strikers at home against Southampton. We've seen it so many times before. It could work, particularly if you want someone super cheap. There are some other fixtures you could potentially play him in. Spurs at home is quite nice for Delap as well, but again, this is another pretty risky strategy. And speaking of risky players in FPL, a lot of people are buying Marmoush, which I definitely understand why that's happening. New big signing in the Premier League for Manchester City. However, the fixtures are really tough for City, and I don't know if I've seen enough from Marmoush to say he is going to be a great FPL asset. He's listed as a forward, but playing on the wing. There is going to be some rotation risk. I don't think Savinho and Grealish are quite done yet, so I don't think I would go there, but I guess it's a fun pick, if nothing else. Darwin is one to avoid. I think with Gakpo's performances, he's probably going to be Gakpo playing primarily. I think Darwin could maybe get one of the 2 games, and Luis Diaz could potentially drop out during the double game week. But I just don't think it's worth the risk generally, particularly if that means sacrificing another Liverpool player. You're going to have Salah in your team. You're going to have at least one of Trent and a Gakpo in your team. Hopefully, maybe even both of those guys. So I'm not really sure where Darwin fits in all of this if you don't have him already. If you do have him already, well, enjoy the risk. It's going to be a chaotic week because Darwin always provides the chaos, but you never know, I suppose. I don't want to be too negative, but I don't think I'd buy him. Raul Jimenez also not a player to buy with these fixtures and recent disappointments. And Jamie Vardy against Everton and Arsenal, not a great run of fixtures for him either. Let's move on. So we've got our midfielders here next, and Brian Mbeumo, despite no double game week, is my favourite pick of the week in the midfield position. I love these fixtures. Spurs, West Ham and Leicester. We know Brentford have a guarantee of a game week, a playing game week in game week 29. They are going to have a fixture there, even though it is a slightly tougher one against Bournemouth, I believe. But yeah, still, penalty taker, cheat code in FPL, and I think he's going to do very, very well against some very, very easy opponents in the next 3-4 game weeks. I think he is, a real nice player to pick up. And if you are looking for a midfielder, that is probably where I would go personally this game week. Luis Diaz and Szoboszlai also have some appeal with the double game week. We spoke about Luis Diaz and him being a high risk, high reward player already. But how about Szoboszlai? Genuinely putting up pretty decent numbers here, particularly as he's only started 3 games in the last 6. Now, he has had some issues with minutes, but that's been around suspension. He was suspended due to yellow cards. He was ill for 1 game week. And the other game, he was benched. And it was actually, what's his name? Curtis Jones, who was starting ahead of Szoboszlai, who is, of course, injured now. So he served his suspension. He's not ill anymore. His primary, competition for a place in the Liverpool team, Jones, is currently injured, which should lead the way to Szoboszlai being nailed on for both games during the double game week, which is really nice. And when you compare his output to someone like Luis Diaz, it's actually slightly better. You know, his underlying numbers are slightly better. His actual attacking returns are slightly better. Even more so when you look at per start, per 90, whatever you want to do like that. So Szoboszlai, as a differential, if you really want to go for something different, you don't really have a place in your team to pick up a Gakpo or a Trent, you can't make it happen, but you do have a free midfield slot, you have a midfielder you want to sell, maybe that could edge you towards doing something slightly different. But again, a little bit risky, a little bit high risk, high reward, but you know, I get it. I certainly get it. Gordon is the first in the monitor category. I think he has dropped out of the buy category now because the fixtures do start to get a little tougher, and we still have that looming game week 29 potential blank for Newcastle. So you may have missed the boat if you don't have him already. And I would probably look in slightly different directions if you're looking to bring in a new midfielder for your team. And we've got the Bournemouth guys up next, Cliver and Ouattara, Dango, I guess he's called, in the game of FPL. Obviously, Cliver is in great form right now and on penalties, and Dango is playing as the central striker in this Bournemouth system at the moment, where he's just scored a hat-trick. However, the next fixture is against Liverpool, but the reason I've put them in monitor and not avoid is because the last 2 game weeks, I thought Newcastle would be too tough for Bournemouth. I thought Nottingham Forest would be too tough for Bournemouth. There is no way I expected Bournemouth to be scoring, 9 goals in the last 2 game weeks? There's no way I expected that to happen, and yet it did, and yet Bournemouth are doing so well. So to write them off entirely against Liverpool would, I think, be foolish of me at this point with the evidence that we have been provided at this point. But still, it's Liverpool, and they are, the top team in the Premier League. They're the best team in the Premier League right now. And although Nottingham Forest and Newcastle were in good form, you would never say they're the best team in the Premier League. So this is a tough one. And I guess you guys have to make up your own mind. Do you have the faith in them to continue? Maybe, maybe not. But what I will say is that after game week 24, when the fixtures turn beautiful, peachy, Southampton, Wolves, back-to-back, certainly these are 2 players I would be very interested in. But for this game week against Liverpool, they have to be monitors, unfortunately. And Phil Foden is another monitor, great form again, but the fixtures are just so tough for the next 3 game weeks. I'm not sure I'd want to go there. So maybe waiting a little while on Foden might be a good idea. He is also super, super expensive. So by going for Foden, you may have to make sacrifices elsewhere in your team. And against these fixtures, I don't know, man. I think Foden could do some damage, but he's certainly not a priority buy for me. And I'm having to be pretty harsh on the avoids here today because, I always pick players for the buy, sell, keep, avoid videos out of the most popular transfers. Like I always say, it's very easy for me to sit here and tell you guys, avoid buying Caicedo. I could say that every week and everyone would agree with me. Something like that, avoid Lavia because he's injured or stuff like that. So I do try and pick out of the players who a lot of people are transferring in, and Rodgers, Semenyo and Ahmad are in that category. But I don't think any of them are terrible picks or anything like that. I just think when I look around at some of the other options, I prefer them. I think certainly in the cheap midfielder category, we are going to be looking more at Cliver and Dango from game week 25 onwards. These are going to be definitely the preferred guys. So I don't know if there's really a place to buy Rodgers or Semenyo or Ahmad right now. And I think I would rather just buy a Cliver, buy a Dango, try them out against Liverpool, or even bench them rather than go for a Rodgers, Semenyo or Ahmad. I know Semenyo, by the way, he's doing okay at the moment, but not quite on the same level as Cliver and Dango. So I think when you make that comparison, I think Semenyo misses out unless you're going to have all 3, which I probably doubt it. And Ahmad, yeah, it's just about circumstance, really. There's just better cheap midfielders to go for right now. But the cheap midfield market is pretty hot. And let's look at some new defenders you guys might want to buy for your FPL teams. And at the top of the list, well, we have the Liverpool key trio. The left back position, a little bit more contentious with Robertson and Tsimikas, with a little bit of rotation there. But certainly, we can imagine that Trent, Konate and Virgil play both games during the double game week, with Konate maybe most at risk there, as he is playing with painkillers at the moment. Maybe things will start to improve for him in the next couple of weeks. But there is some small amount of risk for Konate, but he is also significantly cheaper than his contemporaries in the Liverpool defence. But certainly Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think, is near essential. I know Gakpo is the hype guy at the moment, but I would argue that Trent is just as important, if not more important, than Gakpo in your FPL team this week, considering his creative numbers are brilliant, his shooting numbers are great on those set pieces, be those corners or free kicks. He is going to have a lot of opportunities to get attacking returns, and then we've got the clean sheet potential on top of that as well. So really, really like Trent as a pick. I would be looking to bring him in if you don't have him already. Hopefully most of you guys are already on the ball there. But if you want to go for someone else a little bit cheaper, Konate, Van Dijk, absolutely fine as well if you can afford to go to them. But it is going to depend what your priority is. Which Liverpool player do you prefer? Ideally, we could have the full Liverpool 11 as our FPL teams this week. Sadly, it's not possible. But if you are going to buy a Liverpool defender, I don't mind Konate, don't mind Virgil. I think they're absolutely fine to go for, provided you have a spare slot and you're willing to go for them above some of the other options. In the monitor category, we're going to see some Everton defenders here, because I don't actually think Everton defenders are completely necessary. I think you could definitely potentially go for them, but I don't think they are 100% necessary. And that's mostly because Everton have been, I don't know, not quite as good defensively over the last few game weeks. They are conceding a few more chances, which I think means the clean sheet potential has dropped a little bit. Aside from that Brighton game, which they just played in game week 23, and yeah, obviously they did pick up the clean sheet in that game. Prior to that, there has been no clean sheets since game week 17, and that was under different management, under Sean Dyche. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure if I love these Everton defenders, but certainly against Leicester it's pretty nice. Don't expect anything against Liverpool. After that, you might pick up the occasional clean sheet, but these are not going to be, these Everton players are not going to be, you know, key players in your FPL team beyond game week 24, in my opinion. Kirkes one to monitor. I again would try and give him one more week before buying him, but if you need a defender for long term, I think Kirkes is probably your guy. Tarkowski comes in here as a bit of a differential. If for some reason you want to go for him with a little bit of that, I don't know, corner header threat, then maybe things could go your way. Aina is in here as well as a monitor. I don't think he is an absolute avoid for this game week, but certainly not a high priority pickup, with the fixtures turning a lot worse after the Brighton game, if you don't have him already, of course. And yeah, I think it's too late to bring in Lewis Hall. I think if I didn't have him already, which I do, by the way, I wouldn't be buying him right now, if I'm totally honest with you guys. Even potentially looking at selling him soon. And that's going to come down to whether Newcastle blank in game week 29. Because if you do buy Hall, sure, the Fulham and Forest fixtures are okay, but there's not going to be that much opportunity to play him. And at 5.1 million, you want to play a player like that most game weeks. So I don't think I would buy Hall anymore. I think the time to buy him has now gone. That's just my opinion. And I say that as a Lewis Hall owner as well. So believe me, no bias there. Gavardio, not a player I would buy. Not with these fixtures. Absolutely no way. I don't think you guys need too much convincing on that one. And Mark Gay, yes, he scored a goal a couple of weeks ago, but that is pretty rare for him. He's not a particularly big player for goal threat, and the fixtures are pretty mediocre. So I think we can do a little bit better than that, maybe looking slightly higher up the list of defenders to buy this game week. And finally, goalkeepers. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward this game week. If you have Alisson and Pickford, you 100% keep them. If you don't have Alisson or Pickford, they are going to be your top priority buys in the goalkeeper slot if you want to make a goalkeeper transfer. But yeah, really the only few goalkeepers I would definitely sell would be like Sanchez and Dubravka, because Sanchez is just not going very well at all, and Dubravka, well, Pope was, he's back in the squad, back on the bench. Pope's going to be back in the starting 11 very soon, so Dubravka is at risk. So I'd be very comfortable selling Sanchez and Dubravka. I said I would definitely sell them. What I mean is, if I definitely wanted to make a goalkeeper transfer, these guys I would be totally fine with selling. Everyone else is a little bit more, I don't know if I'd do it or not. Goalkeeper transfers, I don't know, man. They rarely pay off. But there's some potential there for sure. If you have the free transfers available, if you've got a plan in place, go for it. In terms of those avoids, I just picked out the third and fourth most popular goalkeeper transfers which are Sells and Martinez. Because honestly, if you're making a goalkeeper transfer this week, it should be one of Alisson and Pickford. Everyone else is an avoid, in my opinion. So there we go. Those are the goalkeepers. Of course, we spoke about plenty of players in today's episode of Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid. But if there's anyone we missed out and you'd like me to talk about them, let me know by posting a comment in the comment section and I will rate your players, buys, sells, keeps, or an avoids. So let me know in the comments if there's anyone else to talk about. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you do drop a like, do subscribe if you're new around here, and check out the latest episode of the Stick to FPL podcast. I know you guys are going to get a lot of good information about that one, but aside from that, I will see you tomorrow for another FPL video. I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.